lights up in here, but you said something about discuss what you wanted to discuss tonight.
Oh, I was, well, we had talked about it before a little bit, just, you had mentioned it about the culture and everything. And, culture is really big, to me, as far as with Meet and Mentor growing, that the Lord spoke about, developing a culture within the workplace, and like a learning environment and things. But then, talking about culture in essence, like what it actually is, what people, think of when you hear that word. And then,
well, that's what they think. Oh, okay, I got you.
Culture as family, like how we develop it in our family and a marriage, so that's what I've just really been having on my heart lately. Even with a dream I had last night, I've been hearing a lot about multicultural, and as far as like going into like unity again, like within culture. So
right, because culture can apply to several aspects. There's different levels to it. There's culture within a home, there's culture within a family, there's culture within a region, there's culture within a people, there's culture within your church. So there's so many levels to that. That's why I was asking when you said culture, I was like specifically where we're going to target. But I think if we focus on our name, family, friends, faith, other way around, faith, family, friends, then we can actually tear it down like that if you wanted to. And then also too, the Lord just gave me something and I just lost it. Oh my goodness, I was talking and
Holy Spirit, bring it back.
Whoa. It'll come back to me. I know it will, because it was on that topic. It was on culture.
So what, when you guys think of the word culture, or what do you think of?
And when you're saying culture, are you saying culture like what Jason was saying? What is it in the family? Is it in the faith? Like
what do you think of immediately when you think of culture? Like, it can mean different things, but what is the one thing that when you think of it?
I mean, I know for me, when I hear the word culture, I think about the way that I was raised up, the environment I was raised up in, and the similarities that I have with other African American households. When I think of culture, it's like the similarities between African American households. Like me and Tim, we probably have a lot of similarities in the way that we were raised in, and the way that we grew up, because of the culture. It's like somehow, I don't know how it happened, but somehow, Black households in Maryland, can have the same, can have a lot of similarities as a Black household in Florida, whereas maybe in a non-Black household, not so much.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
When I hear the word culture, I think about, just the African American community as a whole.
Like ethnicity, just or race. Okay.
For me, it's like as soon as I hear culture, then it's like it's splattered, like, you know what I mean? Like I just immediately I think of the way I grew up. I think of being someone from South Florida. I think of just being a Black person. It's like an array of things come to my mind when I hear the word culture. So if somebody was to ask me, how would you define culture, then that's kind of how I would define it. I probably would throw back that question and say, well, what do you mean? Like,
right.
Because, I'm from down south, Florida, we got a different way that how we view culture. Like Aries came from a predominantly Black neighborhood, whereas I come from, yes, it's a Black neighborhood, but it's a Black neighborhood with Haitians, Jamaicans,
right.
Just regular African Americans. So it's so, to me, it's diverse within that, because I grew up eating Jamaican food, I grew up eating Haitian food, I grew up eating all these different things, because that's the that's the environment I lived in. Those are my friends. My friends are Haitians and Jamaicans and African Americans and white, you know, so I have a lot of friends from all different backgrounds. Whereas in, you know, with someone from up north, they come down, they're like, man, this is, what is this? Is it the islands? Is it, you know, what is it here? You know? And that was a big culture shock for her.
Yeah, I mean, it felt like a whole like different world down here.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
So even though you
down here, like I didn't even understand what people were saying, you know, because either their accent was so thick, or you know, it was a big Hispanic community, and you know, I had to really adjust to all of that. It just felt like I stepped into a different world. Like he said, it was definitely more diverse than where I grew up at.
So you're saying, so at the beginning I heard you say too that because you are both, you know, African American, is that what you would define like yourself as too? Like where did you didn't come from, right?
Yeah,
not Jamaican or anything, right? So you said that there were similarities, but then now like also too that there's also differences, even though you're both right of color. So what are some of those similarities and differences maybe in how they affected your marriage even?
Oh, that's a cool question.
You know, I think the biggest thing, and this is probably like, this is something that's big in the African American community, and it's unfortunate, but the color difference, skin color difference, like that's still prevalent in our community. Like people still harp on, you know, you're dark skin or you're light skin. It's like neither one is the right color to somebody else, and that's always been a struggle. You know, I'm sure Tim probably got picked on for being dark skinned, and I got picked on for being light skinned. You know, they called me the milkman's baby and everything.
Oh, wow.
Say I must be adopted, or you know, where you from? You know, you can't be fully black. You got to be mixed with something. It's just
Oh, wow.
Never truly feel accepted for what you are, you know, in your own community sometimes. So
I would say even within your own community, you're still facing it too. I mean, even outside your community, you know, it is what it is. But then even within your own people where you should feel the most secure, there's still something there too. Wow.
Yeah, it's definitely, you know, that I can definitely speak to, you know, within our marriage, you know, it's definitely like, oh, you know, Tim found a girl who got good hair and light skin, you know, and that was something to be kind of like, oh, he found him somebody who fine, you know what I mean? That was considered fine or good looking, instead of, you know, what if I would have married a dark skinned woman? It probably would have looked, you know, I don't know if I would get the same type of feedback, you know, from our community. Even with my children, you know, my children, like, they have different grades of hair. So Tim has more of my grade, and then it goes down to where David has all of her grade of hair, and then Isaiah's in the middle. And so now it's like, you know, David gets all the praise about his hair, you know, because he's like a dark, you know, dark skin and complexion. You know, he's a darker skin complexion, and he has that good hair. They call it good hair. That's our whole thing. Like, good hair, you know. And so it's something that, you know, he's probably gonna grow up in and hear that a lot. But then they'll say, well, you know, the other two they have pretty good too, but they've got that good hair. You know,
you wonder how it affects the older ones as they grow up and they hear, you know, their younger brother getting praises about his hair.
Something he can't even control.
Yeah. Right. And nobody's saying anything about their hair. Or, you know, saying, oh, you got hair like your daddy. You don't have that. What does that do to a child that's 7, 9 years old, you know?
Right. So it's up to me as a father, you know what I mean? I come from, you know what I mean, where I don't have the quote unquote good hair. So I can speak to that and build, you know, confidence in my child, you know, who may feel, you know, just like he doesn't quite fit or he doesn't feel good about it. He can now say, well, I feel good to be my dad's child, So I want to be just like my dad. So why not have the hair like my dad? You know, so those type of things is kind of what we see. But shades of color in the Black community in our culture is, you know, a big thing. You even have it where they say, you know, light-skinned women have an attitude. That's in our culture. It's like, if you're light-skinned, you're more likely to have an attitude, or you're kind of hard to deal with because you just you just light-skinned, you know. And so a dark-skinned woman would probably be more easy to deal with than a light-skinned woman.
Interesting.
Yeah, because that's just how it's just been brought up from who knows how long this has been coming up in our community. But and then some light-skinned women will take on that attitude,
That's what I was thinking.
you know, and they start to be difficult. You know, just because I remember growing up, I never wanted to marry a light-skinned woman. That was just it. Like, if I was gonna marry, I didn't have a specific race that I was gonna marry, but I knew that if I was gonna marry within my race, then I didn't want a light-skinned woman.
See, God knew what to give you.
Yeah.
Also, too, but to piggyback, I think you said it right, because I mean, this applies to any sort of label you place on a person. If they hear it from a young age, they'll start to identify with it and mold into it. So the more you speak something over somebody, no matter what it is, right? And it's all of a sudden like, oh, I have a green light to have an attitude because I have light skin. Well, guess what? I'm gonna have an attitude, and then it's like a free pass. But again, I just using the example you gave, but that could be for anything. Like, oh, you have anger issues? That's fine. It's okay to punch a wall. He has anger issues. Oh, I can punch walls now? Boom, boom. You know what I mean? It's the same kind of thing.
When you said identify, I was thinking about that too, how directly linked identity then becomes a part of, like, with culture, because you begin to identify with those. But what is our true identity? You know, we don't often find that. And until we've talked about this before when we, you know, where we met Jesus, you know, or accepted Jesus, and we can identify that we are sons and daughters of him, you know.
What about you? What about culture? When you hear culture, what do you think?
When I think of culture?
Yeah.
Well, right now I think of when I think of culture, I think of it on a more broad, more grand scale of like, how can we change culture? Because I'm like, you know, what can we change within our homes? Like, how can we I feel like culture doesn't have to stay, you know, all as one. I don't know. I guess I think of it like how to change culture, and like how to bring it into something unified, more unified. That's what I think of personally.
So when you think culture, you think more of a wider scale. Like, you don't think just like race or region. You think like globally, like a global culture.
Right. Like, I mean, that's why when I was talking about like change a generation, like changing like culture as a whole, like, so how do we do that? Well, how do we do that? And how do we unify culture? Well, how do we bring, I know it's kind of, it might seem like it's kind of all, you know.
So when you were growing up, and what kind of culture did you feel like you have? Like, what was your heritage, or, you know, like, did that have any meaning, or did it mean anything?
I feel like it didn't impact me really, the meaning of like culture, until I was taken out of my original culture of like, I grew up in all white, you know, schools here in Volusia County, in Port Orange. And so, you know, maybe there was one or two, you know, different races in general. I really didn't know too much more than that. So I never really thought about culture really, like when I was young or anything like that, until I moved to South Florida and was opened up to a wide, like, just diversity in general. To me at the beginning, it was like kind of culture shock, but then it was like, I love this because of basketball, really, you know, in middle school, that I just was able, and I went to Lake Worth Middle School, so I had a lot of Hispanics as well. So a lot of Haitians, like you said, a lot of Hispanics, a lot of just everything. And I loved it. So I feel like I think that was the best decision that my mom could have ever chosen to do, you know, was to go down there. So I didn't really think about it until then. But now I think of culture of more of values and belief systems and things like that than just like ethnicity. Obviously it affects that though, because like what you're saying, you know, that's passed down generation to generation, you know, so we can internalize and identify with these almost either good things or bad things about, and they can be either curses, you know, or things that we want to pass down to our children, you know, and how can we break those cycles and how can we continue the right cycles, you know?
So I know that you know, I know what high school you went to. You went to Palm Beach Lakes High School. So this is a, you know, predominantly black high school that you attended. And then on top of that, you know, you became valedictorian and you played a little bit of basketball there. So I know that there was a culture that school, every school has their own culture.
Right.
So they had a culture. It was a culture at that school. How did you feel being inside of that culture? And were you ever, you know, looked at as an outlier, or were you included? And how did you start to identify yourself versus, you know, your environment?
Right. That's a great question. And I feel like, so the school itself, yes, it did have it did have an overall culture. Oh, we're gonna pass her to Daddy.
Yep.
We're gonna had an overall culture. Like you said, it was I was, as a white minority, I was actually trained in, not bussed in. I took the tri-rail from Boynton Beach.
Right.
To West Palm Beach, and which was such an experience in itself because I went to a magnet program. So in the teacher academy that was there, and within the whole school, you know, it was mostly black, and then the magnet school was, the teacher academy was mostly white kids.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, within the teacher academy there were a couple, you know, different races within, but so we had this kind of, you know, culture in itself there. And then also I went and did like, it just came to my mind, there was I interned in the special needs classroom. So there was like a special needs culture that I felt like I went into sometimes. And then I was also in student government, and student government was like all the leaders of kind of, you know, the school. And so that was mixed, like different races, you know, people, I guess, call it cliques now, but like, it's really, it's your own cultures within the culture, you know?
Right.
So, and then basketball, then athletics. So then I was in that, and I was the only white girl on the basketball team. And that was phenomenal. And because I had confidence in playing basketball and I loved it, and something about me is that I don't care what anybody thinks, usually. Like, when I have something on my heart, not that I don't care what your opinion is or accepting feedback, but I just, if something's on my heart, I'm just going to go do it. So if I really wanted to play basketball, I was going to go play basketball no matter who was out there. But they chose to accept me, you know. Now, it could have went a different way. So I'm very grateful that it didn't. So I'm very thankful to everybody there. But I feel like I was able to adapt into the different cultures, and that also had diversity. If I would have just went into the magnet program and just stayed within the teacher academy, and didn't choose to go into different subsets of whatever you want to call them, then I feel like I wouldn't have got the experience that I would have got, you know. So I chose to step outside of my comfort zone and go in. I forgot kind of what you said, but I feel like it really, I embraced it, and they embraced me. So I feel like my attitude that I had made it easier for them as well. My confidence, you know, they were able, I feel like if I went in being like, you know, I don't want to do this, or timid and shy,
blood in the water,
you know, and they probably would have made, you know, maybe they would have made fun or something like that. And I forgot the other culture was like you said, was the academic culture. So like, then I was on a scale, and actually I was, maybe one day we should have
the baby T-Rex in here.
We should have her on, but like, you know, as valedictorian, and like you said, this isn't to glorify myself or anything, but when we're talking about culture, the salutatorian was Black. And so there was that was also very hard in a way, I guess, to, you know, and feeling like other people were putting us on a competition. I didn't feel like we were competing, but everybody else on the outside, like, oh, there's a white girl on the basketball team, they would always yell, put the white girl in, put the white girl in. You know, or in the teacher, or if I was in, I feel like everybody else was choosing to look at it from a different perspective, but I had my blinders on and I didn't let it affect me. And I'm just thankful to my mom for allowing, you know, for doing that, for giving me that experience.
Yeah.
Does that answer your question? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, you definitely, you brought it all in. And I think that, you know, anyone listening, they can hear how you felt being, you know, inside of those different, you know, subsets, I would call them, you know. So it's just like you adapt. The biggest thing is you adapted to each culture, because mainly probably because you didn't identify yourself with one culture. You know, that's what I heard. You know, you didn't identify and say, well, I'm, you know, a white girl who's Jewish, so I'm just gonna hang with all the Jewish people, and even though you're not Jewish, but I'm just, you know, giving an example. It's just saying that you didn't click up with just one type of thing. You just saying, if I'm gonna be a part of that, then I'm gonna see what that's about and see if I want to be a part of it. If I'm a part of it, then I'm a part of that culture as well. You know, so I just look like I'm able to adapt into any situation. I can be thrown into any situation. And I think the biggest thing that people should, you know, hear is the confidence that you walked into every situation. That's the biggest thing. When you have that confidence and people can see that confidence radiating from you, then it's hard for them to challenge you. It's hard for them to put you down and pick on you and those type of things. And because that's kind of similar to how I handle being a dark-skinned, short, you know, Black male in these schools, you know, because usually back then when I was growing, it's crazy how we got times where it was light-skinned people were in style. We had that thing where we were saying, it was like, yeah, it's like right now light-skinned men are in style, so that's what women are attracted to. And then there's a period of time.
I'm blown away by this.
Yeah,
it really comes from like from television or from the movie screens. Like whoever's the big star right now. I know growing up it was Shamar Moore, and he was just light skinned with curly hair, so all the girls loved him. And so light skin was in style back then. And then I don't know who came out that was darker skinned, and then dark skinned men came in style. So it's based on, it's Hollywood. It's like Hollywood determines who's in style.
Yeah.
And that just shows me though too, like, where does our foundation lie?
Yep.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like where are we looking to, you know, to find what culture looks like in our lives? So where's values in our belief systems? Are we getting them from the media and from TV? this makes me riled up because I'm like, what are we doing? You know, like, and how are we imparting that to our children? You know, and wow, thank you for sharing this. Keep going. Sorry. That's
yeah. I mean, we're gonna keep going back. I want to hear from Jason too, because I know Jason has a whole, different cult. So hey, let's hear how is it? Frame it up for us.
How much time do we have? I'm many layers. I'm a deep man. First of all, when I hear the word culture, I just think of habits and customs. I think of what we do, and I just my brain, I think it levels, and just like that's why when she said the word, I named region, house, because that's just my brain just goes. It's almost like in a fraction of a second, I just think of levels. I just think it's just this term that we all understand, but it's so like amoebic. It's like a cell. It just keeps. It's not, can't be quantified or defined. But I also think too, and I heard this thing was great. It was great. I was watching this thing on YouTube, and there's this guy in New York City, and he was standing outside of a Muslim mosque, and they were getting out of their worship, and he's a Christian, and he was like on the microphone. He's being really belligerent. He shouldn't have been doing what he was doing. But at the same time, an African-American male came up to him. He's from Jamaica. And he was really stuck on the features of Jesus. He was really stuck on what he physically looked like. And he's like, he wasn't European. He wasn't this, he wasn't that. And the guy that was preaching, he looked actually almost like Middle Eastern to me. Like he wasn't like a white guy, and he wasn't like a black guy. He was just like, so the guy that came up to him was black, and he's like, oh, you didn't have this, you had that. And he said something so perfect. And I think this applies to culture. He said something so perfect. He says, let me ask you a question. He's like, what color is your spirit? And he's like, does it matter? Like, he's like, so you're going to focus on what somebody painted Jesus's face. You're going to be so caught up on what color they chose to paint his skin. What color is your spirit? Like, and he's like, you're worried about worry about the words, worry about the man, worry about his message. He's like, don't let the enemy take something that's so trivial. And like, so like I look at us and we think culture. Yes, we think race, we think region, we think house, we think all these things, but like at the end of the day, we're all God's people, we're all God's children. And so we should be unified in that culture, and that piggybacks on like the broader scale of things. For me personally, growing up in South Florida, I grew up in Homestead, and where I grew up, I was always a minority my whole life until I left home at 21, which I'll get there in a second. It's almost like the opposite of what she went through. Because when I grew up in Homestead, it was like an equal balance, thirds. It was like Mexican, white, and black. There's like three predominant races that I went to elementary school with. Because it was a Homestead when I was growing up was a farming, agricultural. It was like farmlands. It would grow avocados, it would grow strawberries, it would grow beans. And so there's a huge Latin influence, and predominantly it was Mexican, but there were Puerto Ricans, especially Cubans, mixed in as well. And so all my friends, I mean, I had like maybe my cousin and like two white friends. Everybody else was something else, like Dominican or Haitian or like, so like for me, it was normal, and for me, it was just, and they accepted me, I accepted them. And it was like, racism was never a thing. And it's funny. And it's so like growing up, then I went to middle school in the Redlands, same thing. It was like, I'd say equal. It was like, Hispanic, black, white. I'd say probably one or two. White was probably like the lesser, but it was pretty equal numbers. My high school went to Miami Southridge and Cutler Ridge. My school was in the middle of the projects. It was literally a landfill that they cleared out, built my high school in the middle of low-income housing projects. And so we were right in the middle of the hood. And my dad started working there when I was about 3. So my whole elementary school career, my whole middle school career, I spent my nights at Southridge. I spent my teacher work days at Southridge. I spent, you know, my dad was the athletic director. So like he was always at the basketball games and the soccer games and the baseball games and the football games. So I was with all these parents and all these kids. And so like I was my whole life, I was just immersed in culture. Dominican, Haitian, Puerto Rican, everything was just this melting pot. And it's just like you, the food, the music, the style, the language. Like I've lost more Spanish living up here than I have, you know, but when I was down there, I couldn't have full conversation in Spanish, but I could hear somebody having a conversation and I could grab phrases and words and put stuff together. And it was just this great thing that I left home at 21. I left home at 21 and I moved to Gainesville. White people USA. Like it was a culture shock. It was, I literally, and this is not me trying to sound cool or trying to identify. This is God's honest truth. Like when I got to Gainesville, I went to culture shock because there was just so many white people. And the crazy thing is, especially the heavy Latin influence. Because in my high school, we were 11%. My high school was 11%. Wow. And so it was like every class picture, I was amongst Black people and Spanish people. So like with that Latin influence, whenever I meet a girl, complete stranger, oh, I'm blah, blah, blah. Oh, I'm Jason. You know, we kiss on the cheek.
Yeah.
That's just how they shake hands. When I got to Gainesville, I felt like some sort of predator because like, it was like, I'm serious. The girls were freaked out by it. They were like, oh, it's like, oh, hey, Jason, this is my girlfriend, Brittany. I'm like, hey, Brittany. And they back up. And it was like, I was like, oh, I'm sorry. Let me shake your hand, you know? And then like when I went to Publix and the guy was like, do you want paper or plastic? I looked at him because I'm like, oh, you didn't say that in Spanish. You know what I mean? Like, it was weird for me, like little things. And so I had like a reverse culture shock. And then so when I got there, it took me a couple months to really like get to grips with it. And then like it's funny too, so I started taking classes at Santa Fe, like I would find myself seeking out the Black community, the Spanish community, because there were so few and they were the people that I most identified with.
Right.
Because even though our skin were different color, we were all part, like our culture, we were all like we came from, you know, middle class families, divorced. My parents were divorced. Most kids' parents were like, or some were married, but like parents who worked, parents who didn't have a ton of money, but had enough to get by. You know, we were all somewhat educated. So it was like, we all had like, to me, like that culture, I had more in common with them. Cause up in Gainesville, there's a lot of people that come from money. And so it's like, you know, I didn't identify with that. Like, not that I was poor, like my parents provided, I had clothes, I had everything I asked for, everything I needed. But at the same time, I didn't understand big houses and all that. Mm-hmm. And so like, so for me, you know, I just, it was the opposite. And you know, and that's one thing living up here, like I love Daytona and I don't want to leave. But at the same time, it's like, I'm kind of bummed a little bit that, you know, our kids aren't going to be able to, I mean, you know, have that same experience, because just to piggyback on what she was saying, and I feel like growing up in that environment helped mold me into becoming an adaptable person. Like I can be in a room with anybody, anybody. Right. And you put me in a room full of strangers, and if I'm not friends with all of them by the end of that meeting, there's something wrong with one of them. There's something they gotta pray to God about.
That's why we're together.
I worked on you, baby. I worked down. She wanted nothing to do with me. You talk about different cultures as far as before we got down. That's a whole different story. But but anyway, like I was just reminded of when we were talking about this, and I feel like this applies. You know, I was looking at the Bible and talking about culture, and in that part in Mark 3, when Jesus was praying with the people and he's surrounded by all the people. And someone's like, hey, Jesus, your mom and your dad, your brothers and your dad, they're outside. And he's like, your brothers and mother are outside looking for you. He's looking around. It says in Mark 3:33, and he says, but he answered them saying, who is my mother or my brothers? And he looked around him in a circle at those who sat about him. And he said, here are my mother and my brothers. For whoever does the will of God is my mother and my sister and my mother. And I feel like my brother and my sister and my mother, pardon me. And I feel like that's what it's about, man. Like if we're co-laboring, if we're co-laboring, produce fruit here on earth,
right,
to glorify God, then you are my brother. You are my sister. What your name is, what your skin color is, what your favorite color is, you know, what kind of music you listen to, what kind of clothes you wear, how much money's in your bank account.
Right. None of that matters.
None of that matters, because guess what? It don't come with us.
right.
It doesn't come with us. You know what I mean? It's like when we get up there and we look Jesus in his eye and he's advocating for us to the Father, they're going to look at the fruit of our life. They're going to look at what we've done. And God made us relational people. Like, we're not supposed to do this alone. And I feel like that's where we're going when that man said on the street corner is like, what color is your spirit? Because at the end of the day, if God wills it, and the human race exists for another 10 million years, eventually, physically in the natural, we're all going to blend.
Yep.
There's not going to be black and white and brown and yellow. It's not going to happen. We're going to be one culture, one race, one color. And then what are people going to look at? You know what I mean? So it's like, if we're looking in the natural, we're trying to pick each other apart: light skin, dark skin, good hair, bad hair, you know.
Socioeconomic status.
Right.
And
for white people, it's like, are you a ginger? Are you, are you tall? Are you short? You know, whatever. But it's like, none of that's going to matter. And it's like, and so people can get past that. And I feel like that's what we've been as a society, as a culture in America for the past 200 years, 300 years. It's like, are we going to get past that and start working together, co-laboring together, honoring God, and just helping our brothers and sisters in Christ? And just, that's what he wants. And that's what we should be doing. And I believe our experiences shape us, our pasts influence us and give us lessons, but it's up to us to take those lessons and apply them and ask what God is showing us in those seasons. Like, and what God, not why did you put me through that, but it's like, what were you trying to show me there? And what should I be doing with that information? And what can I do to help somebody else? And I feel like that's the culture we need to start bringing to the table. That's the culture that we should start setting the tone for, is how are we supposed to work together and co-labor together? And
You want to know my favorite word?
What's that?
Community. And unity is in community.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah.